Ethan May.
Matt Phillips.
Kylie Johnson.
And I'm William B. Good morning, everybody. Today, me and my group are going to be presenting technical definitions. In our presentation, we'll be talking about different definitions, different types, and how they'll be put into context. We'll also be talking about keeping an audience in mind when defining something, and lastly, just a couple of tips that you guys can take home on definitions. So to get us started, we're going to give you guys a couple of mystery words here on the board, and we want you guys to try and define them and also keep them in mind throughout the presentation.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to call on you guys individually. The words are Netflix sweatpants.
Derp Dunk.
The Doink-a-Doink.
And Brittany.
So who has ideas for the definitions of these words?
Just raise your hand.
Netflix sweatpants, is that sweatpants specifically designed to watch Netflix?
Alright. Derp Dunk.
Just anything.
Anyone. Doesn't have to be a serious definition. We're pretty sure you'll get it wrong. Yes.
Someone who doesn't know how to play basketball tries dunking it anyway.
Okay. Alright.
I'll do it.
Alright, what about the Doink-a-Doink? No one? Anyone have something?
It's a bud.
A butt?
But, alright.
What about that? It's easy.
What about Brittany? Anyone got one for Brittany?
Overrated singer.
Overrated singer?
Something you meet at a bar one night and you hope you forget.
What are the closer definitions I've heard thus far?
Where's that brain bleach?
Alright. So, what we're going to do is we're going to put these words on the back burner for just a couple minutes. We're going to move on to the presentation. We're going to come back to them a little later.
Alright, so first we're going to talk about what actually is a technical definition. There are three kinds of main definitions. The first one is parenthetical, and this one's the shortest. This would be used if you have a word that can be described very briefly, and when you do that, you would say the word in a sentence and then put the definition in parentheses after it. An example of this would be a parenthetical definition, and then you would have parentheses. A short definition is used in the middle of a sentence.
Right. And when a parenthetical definition isn't enough, you want to use a sentence definition. It's a little bit longer. There are three main parts to it. So you want to state the term, a broader class, and then list some of the distinguishing features. So for example, water is a liquid made of molecules of hydrogen and oxygen in a ratio of 2 to 1, where water is the term, liquid is the class, and then the molecules in the ratio would be your distinguishing features.
An expanded definition is used when a parenthetical or a sentence definition isn't enough to define your word. The definition needs to be placed either before your word is used in context, or you can reference to it in an appendix. And the most common type of expanded definition is the first paragraph of a Wikipedia article.
Alright, so the next thing that we're going to go over are some aspects that you want your definitions to have and a couple things that you want to avoid. The first thing that you want to include is a lot of clarity in your definition. You want to make sure that you and the reader are on the same page. So you don't want to be throwing around 5-syllable words trying to define something that could easily be defined in a way that anyone could understand. So it's definitely best to be as clear as possible when defining a word.
Okay, so I have two major pitfalls when defining something to an audience. The first major pitfall would be being overly worded. You want to avoid being overly worded because not everyone in the audience will have or will be able to obtain an excessive amount of words to define one word. And you want to just keep your definition short and simple for your audience. And so the second pitfall would be the use of slang words. You want to stay away from using slang words because, again, not everyone in the audience may or may not know what the slang word means, and it can also be misinterpreted into something else from what you had in mind.
And the third key point is brevity in your definition. You want to make sure that your definition is always the appropriate length for what you're trying to accomplish. You don't want a parenthetical definition to turn into a sentence definition in the same way that you don't want a sentence definition to turn into an expanded definition. So keeping those definitions at the appropriate length is going to increase the readability of your definition and make sure that everyone's on the same page.
So in this slide, we just have a couple of pros and cons that will help you find the right definition.
Okay, so things to include when you're writing a definition. The first one is common knowledge terms, and these would be words that generally everyone knows. They're not super specific, they're not slang like Will said, and everyone will understand them. Things to exclude would be jargon, so very long words, very technical words, words that the average person might not understand, or whatever group you're defining to will not understand.
Second item to include is necessary info based on the situation. So that can include formal or operational definitions if you're in a professional setting. It can also include analogies, examples, or synonyms if you're in an informal setting for something that's not quite as important. And the second thing to exclude is personal details, because it turns it away from a definition and it becomes a persuasion attempt. And if you're trying to define something that's controversial, like genetic engineering or abortion, it could have serious consequences.
Another thing you can do is include the etymology or history of the word in case if it proves a point or just gives your audience something to relate to so they can better define it for themselves. One thing you want to exclude is introductory adverb phrases. So when you're defining something, you don't want to say X is where or X is when. You'd rather define a noun with a noun, a verb with a verb, and so on. So for example, instead of saying rhyming poetry is where lines contain end rhymes, you'd want to use a noun instead and say rhyming poetry is an art form containing lines whose final words consist of identical stressed syllables.
Alright, so just to sum up what we've given to you so far, we've gone through the different types of definitions of the things that we want to include and exclude, mostly hitting on brevity and clarity and making sure that everything is as readable as possible for the reader. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back to these words that we gave you before, and we're going to go through, we're going to watch this video, and it's going to expand on them a little bit and just give a funnier twist on defining things.
What's a super easy way to tell that your
This
bed
is
is
the video.
awful? The raw egg test. Let me prove it.
I hear your people have more words for snow than any other language.
When the snow falls deep and slow, we call it Naoya. When it's wet and windy, we call it Malakok. We all call it the same thing and we're a bit confusing. What's going on?
This girl I've been seeing, dating, or hanging out with, I don't really know what to call us.
Like the snow, every relationship is different. That's why we have a word for each one.
Wait, seriously?
Ah,
So, what would you call a person who you're seeing but not exclusively?
helping others,
Well, what about friends with benefits?
go fucking,
What about enemies with benefits?
good or fucking.
Someone you start dating right before you move across the country, so your love affair is short-lived and unrealistically passionate.
Ah, best fucking.
The person you have casual sex with in between serious relationships.
Break up, boy.
The person you have casual sex with in between serious relationships and the person you usually have casual sex with is themselves in a serious relationship.
Back up, break up, boy.
Girlfriend?
Netflix sweatpants.
Boyfriend?
Xbox sweatpants.
Someone you talk to all the time, but neither of you will ever make the first move.
Texting, not sexy.
Roommate you want to hook up with.
Bunk bait.
The roommate you did hook up with.
Uncount.
Hot girl you make eyes with on the train.
Whoa, mama.
The hot guy you're making eyes with on the train.
Whoa, mamo.
The girl you had a crush on in high school who got less hot during college, so you finally hooked up with her.
Britney.
They look like your ex.
Oh, homo.
The person you sleep with even though you know you really shouldn't.
Grown bone.
Someone you slept with once or twice, it was great, it's over now, but a year later you still use their HBO Go password.
Game of Thrones bone. Wiener is coming.
When you're dating other people but you're only Snapchatting with each other.
Dick pic exclusive or tick pic exclusive, cooter exclusive, pretty much whatever you can Snapchat, balls or dick or pussy or anything.
Someone you hooked up with but you were both really drunk and way too adventurous, so you went straight to the butt stuff before either of you were really ready for it, so it just ended real bad.
Ah, but doika doink.
Someone you broke up with and they got super hot.
Derp dump.
Someone you were sexting but when you finally met up it turns out they were an entirely different person, but what the hey, you did it anyway.
Derp down.
Someone you would normally never sleep with, but you're staying over at their place and it's really just too convenient to pass up.
Hospitality, huh?
What about the person you met and just shared this instant connection with? But then you accidentally got too drunk and you texted too soon, repeatedly, revealing too much and squashing the blossom of love before it can even bloom.
My people don't have a word for that. We always wait 3 days.
So wise.
Vachita saw, please click to subscribe. Or ha no, which means I'm racist.
Alright guys, thanks. We appreciate your attention.